Exactly. Number 3 is all useful.
Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. Actually, can I get a second bottle of water up here? Okay, that'd be great. Welcome, everybody. I'm Mark Hobick. I'm the CEO and founder of TVTracker.com.
Rich.
Thank you. And this morning's panel is called Preparing the Pitch. And we'll be discussing the important steps producers need to take before pitching their series idea to an agent, a studio, or network exec. I want to remind everybody that we will be fielding questions at the end of the session. Please limit your questions to questions and not pitches. Let me introduce our industry panel. First of all, starting at the end, Drew Tappan is a senior creative executive at Warner Horizon. Drew is responsible for developing original programming in both broadcast and cable for Warner Horizon. Shows that he's developed recently include the hit The Voice, School Pride for NBC, and Hater for the CW, among others. Prior to Warner Horizon, he was the Senior VP of Original Programming and Series Development at MTV, where he worked for 12 years developing and guiding such series as The Real World, Road Rules, Randy Jackson Presents America's Next Dance Crew, and many, many more. Welcome, Drew.
Yay! Fancy.
To Drew's right, we have Carrie McCool, who is the president of Big Red 2 Entertainment. Big Red 2 was founded by respected creator, producer, and TV personality Nigel Lythgoe. Prior, Carrie was the co-head of development for the alternative department at UTA. She was a senior vice president at Fox in alternative programming, head of development at E! and Style, and has successfully advised cable networks, distributors on formats, clients, and brands through her own consultancy. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you. It's like my funeral.
Next on our panel, we have Eli Lehrer. He's the Vice President of Development at Bravo Media. Eli leads development for Bravo on both coasts. He has developed some of the network's most noteworthy programming, including Flipping Out, The Real Housewives of New York City, The Rachel Zoe Project, among others. He executive produced Watch What Happens Live and Tabitha Salon Takeover, one of my favorites, among other series. Welcome, Eli.
Yay, welcome.
Liz Dickler. Liz Dickler is the VP of Drama Programming at A&E. Liz is responsible for developing new scripted drama series and miniseries at A&E, as well as overseeing current series, including the hit series The Glades and newcomer Breakout Kings. Prior, Liz oversaw several series at ABC Studios, including Criminal Minds, Castle, Scrubs, and according to Jim, welcome, Liz. And finally, last but not least, it was hard to condense these. They're incredibly accomplished, everybody on this panel. It was hard to condense these into short snippets, but we did the best we could. Last but not least, Christina Davis. She is the Executive Vice President of Drama Series Development at CBS Entertainment. Christina oversees all drama series development for CBS Entertainment, the most watched network in America. She has been integral in the development of the CSI franchise, as well as Without a Trace, Cold Case, Criminal Minds, Ghost Whisperer, Numbers, The Good Wife, and many, many more. Welcome, Christina. So before we begin, thank you. Before we begin, I just want to share a brief story. When Beth and Jordan asked me to do this panel, I said, oh, great. They said, yeah, we'd like you to produce a panel on preparing for the pitch. And what I heard in my mind was an infomercial for TV Tracker. So I'm going to be, I restrained myself and put together a much better panel than one I could have done on my own. So with that said, let's jump in with some Preparing for the Pitch 101. And my first question is for Drew. Drew, what should a producer know before walking into a pitch meeting? What are some do's and don'ts, would you say?
I think there are a lot of things you have to think about before you walk in front of somebody. And the most important thing is that if it is your first pitch, that it's not really your first pitch, that you've done this for friends or family or business associates, because it's getting an audience with someone who can help you and who can make your project bigger and louder and actually get it on the air. So practice it. Remember, make a good first impression also. I think that
Be on time.
be on time, be pleasant, don't fight with people. I've had more pitches where people come in and they fight with me when I tell them it's not quite right for us. Well, yes, it is. I'm like, well, okay. Because you have to remember that this business is all about relationships, and even if this idea isn't the right idea, if you're a really interesting, smart, intelligent person, the next time you call and want to make an appointment, we're going to be more likely to be like, great, oh, they were really nice, and I really like them. Read the room carefully. I think for this group of people, everyone's very nice, and they will be accommodating and respectful. You're going to get some people who you're going to tell right away, like, this probably isn't the right idea for them. They're reading their emails. They're looking out the window. We all know a few of those
Checking
people.
their watch.
Exactly. They're like, it's time to go. Just read the room carefully, and remember that a meeting doesn't have to be 45 minutes or an hour long. If you get your point across quickly and succinctly, that's going to resonate with the buyer as well as a great idea, I think. And remember to stay humble. We're totally egomaniacs. We like to feel like we're the smartest person in the room. So stay humble and kiss our ass a little bit. Like I said, don't fight with the buyer. Don't insult the buyer. Don't be like, that's the worst show I've ever seen. Be like, well, that's our biggest hit. So, and don't forget to do your homework, because the number of times when I was at MTV, I got pitches about 7 strangers moving into a house. I'm like, yeah, that's the real world, and it's on TV already. So don't forget to do that. And please, this is a personal one, don't wear too much perfume or cologne, because you're like coming into our homes, basically. And like, if it smells then for the rest of the day, we're going to have a bad thought about you. So
I knew that Drew would set the vibe for today's panel, so I wanted to just start there.
Exactly.
Straight up.
Exactly.
Straight up.
Keep it real.
Eli, how familiar should a producer be with the network or studio production company's business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's essential. Drew sort of touched on it with the real world example. And I think in this day and age, it's vital that you do your research on the channel, the studio you're going into. I mean, there's so many resources out there between the network's website. We put out development releases a couple times a year that literally lay out 10 new projects that we're working on. And I can't tell you how many times producers come in and pitch me something that we announced 3 weeks ago that we were already working on. So I think it's vital that you're very familiar with the environment you're walking into. The other thing is, producers all the time come in and they'll have 5 different shows that they want to pitch me. I think it's very important that you hone what you bring to the channel. So just because you have 5 ideas you think are great, you should really focus on pitching the 1 or 2 that you think will work for Bravo or Warner or whoever, as opposed to just throwing everything at the wall. I'll pay more attention to those 2 pitches than I will to a sort of broad array of ideas that you bring.
Okay, great. And Carrie, sort of continuing on in that vein, is it helpful to know obviously what a company has on the air before you go into a network, but in terms of development, is it important for a producer to know what's already been bought prior to going in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the TV tracker infomercial part, right? Because that's the only way you can get actually what is in development. But to Eli's point, a lot of things are released in the trades, and TV tracker has everything, of what people are buying. And if you go into a place, and have the same idea, it just makes you look like you don't know what you're doing.
Right. And there's a lot of services out there. I mean, it's not just TV Tracker. There's
No, it's
IMDb,
just TV Tracker.
Pretty much it's
Oh, it's
TV
TV Tracker. It's pretty much TV Tracker. But also what's on air. I mean, I've been at cable networks and networks where people will not know what the #1 show is.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Oh my gosh. Liz, does it help to know something about the exec's background before you go in?
Well, I think there's a fine line between knowing something and having stalker-like information. But yes, I think it can help to kind of touch on things that they've worked on or things that they know, but also more importantly, knowing what the network does and what they're looking for, because each network has a very different type of show that they're doing. So knowing a little bit about their background so you can kind of use that to touch upon what you're pitching can help. It certainly can't hurt.
Sure, and if you go to a site like LinkedIn or something, you
Yeah.
can certainly see where somebody has worked before, and it's always nice if you can find that connection. If they worked with somebody that you know at another company, that's always helpful, I think, to establish a rapport, which is important. And speaking of rapport, Christina, is it useful to warm up the room, or is that a waste of time?
Well, I think it's a little different on the drama side than comedy. I think I've worked exclusively in drama in my career, so it's I think helpful for you to know that on the network side, during pitch season for 3 months, we're hearing 8 or 9 pitches a day. And they're in sort of 50-minute increments so that we can, for 10 minutes, go to the restroom or return phone calls. So it is important to be on time when you get in. Obviously always niceties and hellos and whatnot, but to really jump in because you do have a limited window. A good pitch usually would be done in 35 minutes tops. And that would leave room for some questions after, but it shouldn't go over 45 minutes. That's really the window with which you have when you're coming into the network. It's a little different when you're pitching producers or studios, but it's just important to be on time and know your window. And we respect your time, and you have that window, and then we just ask that you respect ours.
Right. And I think when you're in a sales situation, there is a tendency that you want the buyer to like you, and but the point is, I think you have to rely on your material.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So now, speaking of pitches, I thought it'd be useful to throw out a group question, which is best and worst pitch experiences. Is there anybody that would like to take a stab at that? Drew?
True.
I do remember when I was at MTV, and it's always a little messed up when you're like, here's a show that you'll never see that didn't actually make it on the air, but it was the best pitch experience. At the time, we were doing some scripted. MTV's doing a lot of scripted now, but we were just doing a little bit, and I was focusing predominantly on reality. But this producer that had done some unscripted stuff brought in all this scripted stuff for us, and we sat there and we listened, and we were like, okay, they were decent ideas. There was nothing bad about them. And he was literally on his way out the door. He goes, I have one more thing, and it's so dumb, but it's really simple. And he threw out this simple, disgusting format. But it was basically, what if you took the competitive eating world and you put them and you mixed it with an amusement park? And it was a game show called Hurl. And the idea was,
I'll buy it.
Exactly. I did. I bought it right there. I'm like, I know you think this is a joke. I'm like, that is the greatest idea I've ever heard. It's so simple. He pitched it in 30 seconds. He's a great guy. We knew him. But sometimes those ideas are the best ones. And for reality, as opposed to scripted, the shorter and the clearer, the better. Like if it's different and unique and it's loud and you can imagine what the poster's going to look like we're done. So I think that was my best pitch experience, and probably the reason I'm not at MTV anymore, so.
That show ended up on the air, right? On
G4, yeah, I ended up getting it, so.
Oh, interesting. Christina, do you have
Just in the top of my head,
Yes.
I mean, something like The Mentalist, when Bruno Heller came in and pitched The Mentalist, I always remember that pitch because he came in and he so succinctly knew what that show was. He knew what that character was, the point of view, his backstory. He had the whole Red John backstory worked out, and it was just one of those pitches. They left, and it was like that was a perfect pitch because he knew, and he was sort of breathing that material. One of the worst pitches of recent memory, and speaking of arguing, somebody came in, and I can't even really remember who was pitching, but all I know is there was sort of a producer and a writer, and they had competing agencies, and they each brought an agent, and these people were feuding, and so they continued to fight through the whole pitch. And it was pretty incredible.
Oh my gosh.
And it's sort of also a word of advice. You don't need your agents and managers along. It's, the smaller the group, the better. Some of those bigger agencies kind of want to push their way in the room because they want to have a presence. But, we just need the writer, really just the writer. And then if there's any entities above that, the producer or director. So.
Okay, great. Eli?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the best pitch experiences for me in unscripted are anytime someone walks in with a great piece of tape. We spend all day long taking pitches where people bring in sizzles, and 90% of those experiences within 30 seconds whether or not a character pops, whether or not a character fits with your brand. So those 10% of the time where someone walks in and you just immediately know it's going to work, that's always the most satisfying. I mean, a show like Flipping Out, they came in with a 6-minute sizzle tape, and we went to series a week later because that piece of tape just had so many elements we were looking for. In terms of worst pitch experience, there's one that we always talk about at Bravo, where an agency called us up and they told us they had a very big celebrity that was coming in. They wouldn't tell us who it was. They wouldn't even give us the name for security downstairs at 30 Rock. So they came in for the pitch, and there was a big preamble and a big build-up, and we're waiting for whoever this celebrity, exactly, we're waiting for Tom Cruise. It was a big celebrity who was coming back to TV, and we were the first place they were bringing it, and it was a puppet named Madam from the 70s that I didn't know who it was.
I heard that
so
pitch.
it was, there you go.
I'm older than
I
you.
know Madam.
So I guess the lesson there is don't oversell. You know, you're better off keeping expectations low.
It sounds like agents are the root of so many problems. Carrie, do you have a story you want to share?
I have a lot of good as far as, American Idol, Dancing with the Stars, which we didn't do, Survivor, which we didn't do when I was at Fox, Amazing Race, which we didn't do when I was at Fox, Big Brother, which we didn't do. Wow. By the way, we passed on a lot of hit shows, but they were all very good pitches. But one in particular that I always think about is R.J. Cutler, who did the September issue and is a big, he won an Oscar, didn't he, for The War Room? He did a series that didn't work for us at Fox, and it was American High, and it was based in a high school. But he came in, and instead of just saying like, hey, I'm gonna follow these kids in high school, he came in with Polaroid pictures, and he said, this is Drew. He is blah, blah, blah. This is his girlfriend, so-and-so, who has anorexia. This is, so-and-so who hates her mother. And it was so captivating. We went right to series. Unfortunately, it didn't work. I think it was ahead of its time now that I think about it, because it was 10 years ago or whatever. But he was so invested, and he had so much footage, and he knew who the characters were, and there was a complete thought out thing where if he had just come in and said, hey, I'm going to be in high school, and it was their senior year and then moving on, we would have said great. But this was so well thought out and beautifully articulated. And worst pitches, I could go on and on and on. Monkey on Your Back is one that Mike Darnell talks about all the time, where I was there. And it was when I was at Fox, somebody came in and they said, here's the show, and there's a monkey on your back. And you just run around town and the monkey jumps to somebody else's back. And we said, well, are they addicts? Is this monkey on your back? And they're like, no, we follow the monkey. And he just jumps from one person to the other person. We follow the monkey.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And then the monkey will be famous.
Thinking about the insurance implications for
You
that show.
you love that show, don't you? You're gonna buy it.
They should repitch it.
It's a great show for Bravo.
Liz, do you want to share a story?
Well, it was just a bad pitch experience, not so much about the pitch, but somebody came in completely incoherent and on a lot of medication and could not string together a sentence to save their life. And it was a very awkward half hour, 45 minutes. And then when we went and had them repitch it, they were sober and coherent. And then when we went to the network, they were, again, not so much coherent. So I would say be conscious when you go in pitch places.
Continuing on with that, Liz, part of the preparation is knowing everything there is to know about your project, which we've heard from really all of you up here this morning. But what things should a producer be prepared to be flexible about when they go in?
Well, I think it depends on the place that you're pitching to, of course. And like I said before, I think every network looks for different things when they're hearing pitches and looking for show ideas. But knowing the characters, knowing the story, if it's a procedural type show, what kind of cases you're going to be telling each week, and not just one episode of cases, but a few examples of cases, because at least with the procedural side of things, you need to know the types of stories you can tell. On the character side, you also need to be able to tell the types of relationship stories, and it's not just a pilot, but it has to be able to withstand 100 episodes, hopefully. So knowing where the show will go and what the characters will be doing and their background, it doesn't have to be to the minute detail, but just having an idea, being flexible about maybe the city it takes place in. Sometimes shows don't necessarily have to be in a law firm, but it can be in a medical facility. It just knowing exactly the story you want to tell and what the series will be, and being completely prepared with the ideas that you would have, because a lot of those times when you go into a room and people ask questions of what's episode 3 or what would you want the stories to be told, some people don't always have those answers. So just being completely prepared with that information.
On that note, just to fill in, totally agree. And when you do go into a network, whether it's cable or broadcast, it is the types of stories that we're looking for, because we're looking for the longevity of the series versus that detailed pilot story. I always joke that we'll pay you for that. That's when we actually buy the pitch, then we pay you to come in with a story. We're not looking for that perfect pilot story. It's just, again, emblematic of what you want to do moving forward. So.
Okay, cool. Great. And actually, Christina, the next question is for you. You've been at CBS for 15 years. It's something that we see statistically, but I wonder how much, when you hear a pitch, how does vertical integration or franchise potential weigh on your decision to develop something? Are you encouraged by the parent company to seek out those projects or work with those companies that you're vertically aligned with?
I think the reality today is that the networks are becoming more vertically integrated with their own studios.
Yeah.
It's not that we're not open to hearing. We work with Warner Brothers, we work with Sony. It is getting harder and harder to work with those studios that are connected to their own networks. And not that we don't. We, with ABC Studios, have very successfully run Criminal Minds and Ghost Whisperer and the Criminal Minds spin-off. And it's just that we are incentivized to develop with our sister studio because we have such a close relationship and we're in sort of lockstep. And a lot of their overall deals are people that we target, and they come right to us. You will find that if it's CBS Studios, ABC Studios, NBC Studios, or even 20th, they will, I don't know if they have to, but they will pitch to their network first. So any of those pitches coming in our door, we know that that network has passed on either the idea or literally the pitch. Oh, so, there's a little bit of that, but that's not to say we wouldn't buy. We developed Ringer this year with ABC Studios, and it became a co-production, and then weirdly it went to CW. So, they can take on lives of their own, but, the reality is we develop around 60 projects a year, and about 45 of those are CBS Studio projects. They produced 4 of our 7 pilots, and they got all 4 picked up. So, it's a part of the reality, and again, it doesn't exclude, I think, an opportunity to develop with the other studios, but it's certainly where we're headed, I think.
And certainly, a producer can be placed with any showrunner or at CBSP if it's needed.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of times, too, people come in without a studio because of this issue, and they want to pitch to all the networks and see what the best home is, and then they will sort of back into the studio that the network is connected to. So that's another way of pitching. But again, each studio has sort of a roster of heavy hitters that you could pitch to, and if it's part of the packaging question, but if you're associated with a particular studio, it may lead you toward that network. Yeah. But again, that's not a golden rule.
Okay, thanks. Eli, you've developed some of the most buzzed about unscripted programming in cable television. Are you open to working with relatively unknown producers versus proven entities? How does the network become comfortable with an unknown producer, somebody who's new?
Yeah, we're absolutely open to working with unproven entities. I mean, one of the things I love about unscripted programming is the barriers to entry are relatively low. If someone can identify a great character and has the resources to put them on tape, I think you can get that tape in front of people that can get it to a network. So we do, we feel that part of our job is looking at unsolicited submissions There's obviously a long legal process they have to go through before they get to us, but we do make it part of our job to screen those tapes. If something comes in, and the truth is we've looked at thousands of unsolicited submissions, and I'd say a handful we've gone on to develop, but in instances like that, what we do is we take those producers and we pair them with a production company that we are comfortable with and that we do have a track record with. And the hope is that they bring a comfort level to us, and the producer that brought in the project can sort of learn under them and get their sea legs. And then perhaps the next time they bring us a project, we'll have more faith in allowing them to do it themselves. The other thing that we've done occasionally with less experienced producers is they've brought us a character or an idea, and we've said, okay, we'll option that idea from you, and we'll give you some money to produce a casting reel or a presentation, but we build into the deal us having the option, once they deliver that tape, to either let them go on to be the production company of record for the show, or allowing us at that point to bring in another third party to actually produce it. So there's a lot of different ways it can go, but we certainly are open to producers that we're not familiar with.
Okay, great. I know that the time is flying by, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask one more question to all of you in terms of branding, and then we're going to start taking some questions from the audience, because I know we have a lot of questions that have been brought up here, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions out in the audience, so we want to make sure we have time for that. Let's just get into the branding. All the networks are heavily branded today. It's important for producers to understand, how do you tailor the same idea or pitch to each specific network. Let's start with Drew. With a hit format like The Voice on NBC, how did you tailor that for NBC? Do formats allow for tweaking? Is it more casting? What sort of leeway do you have?
Well, I think it really is dependent on what the format is. With the situation of The Voice that came from Talpa, John DeMall's company, John DeMall's kind of known as one of the kings of international formatting, and because the respect that he's given, rightfully so, he has the ability to walk into a network and kind of say, this is how it's going to be, take it or leave it. And with this case, when we took this out to the networks, it was a very ambitious project because it had done very well in Holland where it premiered, and he felt very confident in the way that he and his team had kind of researched different reality shows and what formats work. If you look at The Voice, it is kind of a confab of a lot of different reality type of shows, but they did mathematical research about, well, this works here and this works here, and he felt very strongly, and the networks were very respectful of him. I don't think that in other formats that I've taken out, every network kind of wants to, make their mark on it, mark their territory a little bit. I think with The Voice in particular, it is an exception to the rule, whereas it kind of came as is, but I think you just need to be aware that without, Big Brother and something like that under your belt, you may still be asked to tinker with it and change it. And with one of the networks we were talking to, they really did want to make some pretty big changes to it. And changes that as the studio, we were like, you know what, that's a really good idea. But John, being John, had that weight and that power to kind of say, this is how it's going to be, with a Dutch accent.
Carrie, you've been on every side of the equation in terms of selling, buying, agency, experience. What is the difference from a producer perspective of selling to broadcast versus cable and unscripted?
I mean, broadcast is just really big. There's not a lot of show ideas, I think, and being at a broadcast network for so long, that fit into that, that bucket. I hate when people say bucket. And zeitgeist. I hate zeitgeist too. But I think it has to be really big. It has to be as big as So You Think You Can Dance, American Idol, The Voice. There's Amazing Race. Those are really big shows. Even Hell's Kitchen is, with Gordon, is a big show. So I think it's very obvious to me what's network and what's cable. And I think cable-wise, if you have a format for cable, it's very easy to tweak it for, whether it's for Lifetime or for Bravo. It's either, sassier, sexier, and richer for this guy. It's older and wearier and more Oprah for Lifetime. But if you have like the Cupcake Shop, or you have Sunset Tan, or you have the Kardashians, it's very obvious where you bring it.
Okay, great. With our network executives, I'm just going to ask you each the same question. If you could briefly sort of give the audience an idea of how do you tailor a pitch to your specific network? And why don't we start with you, Eli, with Bravo?
Sure. I mean, you know, the truth is, pitching unscripted to Bravo at this point, it's so dependent on having tape that, I don't know that there's that much tailoring you have to do. It's kind of like either the character in the world fits for Bravo or it doesn't. And the truth is, it's probably the same tape you're taking to Bravo and Logo and TLC. Perhaps what you emphasize in the room, if you have your character there, what you have him talking about. If it's Bravo, you're talking about the process of whatever their business is, and you're talking about their interpersonal relations. If it's TLC, maybe you're talking about their home life a little more. I don't know. But the truth is, what the pitch, almost 95% of the pitches we take at this point there's a sizzle that they're leaving behind, and I'm assuming that's the same sizzle that's going to every network. So.
And what is the cost of putting together a sizzle these days?
That's a great question.
$20,000.
20?
Oh, come on. You could do it for less.
Well, you could do it for less.
I could do it for less.
Well, look, I
fabulous.
think if you're a production company, it probably is. If you're a one-man
10 to
band that
50.
actually can shoot and has, can edit on your computer,
Exactly,
you can probably
like-
do it for a little less.
Yeah, I think, like you were saying, barriers to entry now, it's so different. You used to have an Avid, to cut something and output it, and now everyone on their Mac can sit and gather. I'm not saying it's going to be the best tape if you're doing it yourself, or you may very well be talented and able to do that, but we are finding that when we're going places, they're asking us to bring us tape if we don't have tape already, and they're saying, well, you should do it for like $5,000, and we're like, okay. But sometimes I think you can, and sometimes I think, depending on the breadth of what you want to show, if you just want to see, a guy whose wife is 9 months pregnant and what the reaction is, I'll get a camera and I'll shoot Eli and I'll watch him and literally wait for his phone to ring. So.
But it's almost impossible to walk into an unscripted network now and say, I want to do a show about 7 kids in high school and only have Polaroids. You either need to bring those 7 kids into the room and have them put on a performance, or you have to have gone out and shot with them for a few days and cut together a tape.
And it's way better that way because no matter who you're pitching to, that person is selling up. I don't care if you're pitching to the head of the network, they need to show their ad sales team or something. So the number of people who are going to be able to say yes in the room is a big number, but the people who are going to be able to get a series really bought are going to need to show their bosses or something else. So you really want to make sure that the person you're selling to is really aware of all the points you want to make, and a tape is the best way to do that. So when you leave the room and they walk into their boss's office, they're not, it was about these high school kids, and here's some tape that they brought in. It's really great. Watch this.
Yeah, no, Drew, there have been a few instances where a producer hasn't put something on tape, they've only brought the talent in, and that talent has been so compelling in the room that I've sort of fallen on my sword with my bosses and said, you won't believe this guy, we have to go shoot with him. But that's very much the exception. In 9 times out of 10, I need a piece of tape that I can, as Drew was saying, put on my boss's desk and say, here, this is great, look at this, and then get them to buy in.
Okay, great. Liz, how about A&E? What are you guys looking for? How do people tailor for you guys?
Well, and I think on the scripted side, it's a little bit different than it is on the nonfiction side. And I would not recommend walking with 7 kids to a pitch on the scripted side. But for us, it really does come down to the idea and what is ultimately on the page, and after it's written, and seeing that idea can really sustain a number of episodes. But when you walk in, and a lot of people that are pitching to us are pitching to a number of the other cable companies like USA or TNT or FX, and a lot of our pitches are kind of going in that same circle of people. And for us, we're really in the procedural landscape, which, theoretically you could take a pitch to us and take it to Christina over at CBS, because they do a lot of the procedurals over there too. But it's really about the story and the cases, and being able to see it live on for many episodes, but knowing on the page that it's going to make sense, it can be in a log line, you could say it in 2 or 3 sentences to explain what the entire show is an important thing, so that you can really sell it in a short period. I mean, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Okay. And Christina?
I think for CBS, just on the drama scripted side, the volume of phone calls, emails that we receive just at the beginning, middle, end of a pitch season are, in the thousands, and we end up in an entire pitch season, which lasts about 3 months, hearing close to 500 pitches. So, there's a filtering process. Obviously, by the time you get to our doorstep, you've gone through, an agent, a manager, a studio, or producer, and when you do come in, we're writer driven, so we first and foremost need to know who's writing the project, and we need to have read a piece of original material, and that for the writers in the room is the most important thing, I think, on the scripted side, because that piece of material, or many pieces of material, that's your calling card, and that's how you identify yourself. And we'll field a phone call or an email, and an agent or manager will say, we've got this writer and this arena, and if the arena sounds, like enticing to us, we'll say, who's the writer? If we know the writer and we're intimate with them, then we probably don't need to read something new. But if we don't know the writer and we're completely open to writers we don't know, we would then need to read a piece of material before we would set that pitch up. And then when you come in the room, as Liz said, concise characters, setting, and typical episode is really, those 3 things are the most important. And again, we will ask the questions if you haven't expressed something, but going too far overboard and pitching too much of an actual pilot, I think is sometimes the mistake when you're walking into a pitch.
Okay, great. So let's take some questions from the audience. You want to come up here and just get in line if you want to ask a question. We're taking them from this mic right here. While you line up, we have a couple questions that have come in. This is being streamed. Apparently we have 30,000 people watching us. So,
Strangers.
give me 1 second.
Maybe I'll be discovered.
So one of the questions we got...
It's your big day, Carrie.
One of the questions we got from the online audience is, should I just shoot my pilot and then pitch? Drew?
I think that's a tricky question. That again, in unscripted, probably not. I think you're better off. Shoot a sizzle tape, because everyone's going to want a lot cheaper, and also, like I said, everyone has a different opinion, and all you're going to do is be throwing money down the drain. I think, because you're going to want the network to weigh in, or the studio to weigh in and help guide you. It's a very risky proposition, but if you are as rich as you are, Mark, I believe you should
Mark,
go.
how rich are you?
How rich are you, by the way? So,
Variety.
Okay, we're going to take real questions now. Go ahead.
Good morning. How is the pitch process different in regards to pitching to an agency versus production company versus network? Like, what's the expectation difference with those 3 different modalities?
Who'd like to answer that?
Carrie. You've done all 3, so
Yeah.
you
I
can
have,
answer
right?
exactly.
I'm old.
Yes, you are.
Network, you have to be very ready and buttoned up, and just like these gals said, and Eli too, just leave them wanting more. That's my only advice for pitching to a network, because I can't tell you how many times it's like people would pitch an idea and we loved it, and then they would go into like the format, and I would say, yes, I've seen Survivor and every other, like I watch television, so you know that there is an elimination process, like every show on television. So you can just go in with, just get up before they get up. It's sort of like a dinner party at the, with the royal family. Just leave before they change their mind. Agency and production company is more, it can be more
informal.
Yeah, informal and not as...
More of a conversation,
Yeah.
more of like, here's what I'm thinking, let us bounce the idea around with you a little bit so that you can kind of get it buttoned up.
So is the expectation the same as far as walking in with a sizzle, or if I'm pitching to an agency, is it more about us selling ourselves as a company versus selling our projects, or is it our individual projects that we want to focus on?
It depends what it is. If you have the greatest bakery in Wisconsin, or if you have the Kardashian sisters, or if it's a world, like Eli said, if it's flipping out and you come in and you say like, hey, it's this guy and his name's Jeff Lewis and he's crazy, you need a tape to express how, like what he is. I don't think you need that for the agency or the production company side, because they could throw in some money for it. But by the time you get to the network, if it is an area, you have to have a tape. If it's a format, then you don't have to necessarily have that, in my opinion.
Great.
Which is
What's your
the
question?
law.
Hi. Are each of you saying that even if you have a great concept or a great treatment, forget about it unless you have an agent?
Eli?
Look, I think it certainly helps bring credibility to what you're pitching wherever you take it, if it's coming from a known entity, whether it's an agent or a production company that we've all worked with and people are familiar with. As I said, there is a mechanism to submit ideas to Bravo and a lot of channels, so we can vet unsolicited submissions. But your odds are significantly better if the projects are coming to us through sort of the traditional channels.
And I second, I actually think, and no offense to the agents in the room, but I think that a lot of times if you align yourself with a production company that's a known heavy hitter in that network's space, that's usually better. Because it just, an agent gives you credibility, they just get you in the door basically. Whereas a production company, I think, brings a little more credibility, because it means that they've heard the idea, they like the idea too, and say, hey, you've got something interesting here, we can back you on this.
Well, they can actually make it for the budget.
Exactly.
Well, I go back and forth on this, because let's say you've gone out and you've shot an amazing sizzle reel on your own. People always ask, should I pair with a production company before I bring it to you or not? If you really have a great tape and it makes it to us, there is some advantage to being unattached, because we can then place you with a company that Bravo in particular is comfortable with. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you've already gone out and found a production company, you might be walking in the door with a production company that we have a bad history
baggage,
with,
yeah.
or we don't think they can produce our kind of show. Right. So, there's strengths and weaknesses to either way. That said, you'll probably get a pitch much more easily if you're walking in the door with a production company. Mm-hmm. So.
We didn't answer your question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's not a definitive.
Go with God.
Yeah.
Certainly in scripted, though, I'd like you guys to just weigh in terms of agents, yes, no. I mean, you kind of...
It just, again, given the volume, we rely heavily on agents and managers to vet the material coming through. Right. Again, it's a trusted relationship we have with the agencies in town. There's a legal reality to this as well, which is we can't just field cold calls because we open ourselves to lawsuits. So, if you have some type of connection inside the particular network, and you don't have an agent or a manager, they'll likely have you sign a legal release. But that's not something that we sort of open the floodgates for. So, it's just, again, it protects you, it protects us, and it's just a reality.
Okay. I'm afraid we're out of time, but I want to thank the panel. Thank you very much. And thank you for coming.
That was fast. No baby?
No baby. Although it did vibrate.